This is the Sony 70-350 f4.5 to 6.3 G OSS. And yes, I got this lens because I got the case of the Zoomies. If you clicked on this video, I have a strong suspicion you do too, and you're wondering if this lens is worth picking up. Well, let me explain my story and why I bought this lens. Now, ever since I created this YouTube short, and it got a ton of views, this ended up being a search term in my analytics for like the longest time. And then ever so recently, I posted on my community post, which you should check out by the way, that I was going to do a few lens reviews while I'm here in the UK. And I put 3 of the lenses that I brought with me. And most of you voted for this one, and this is what we're going to look at today. So I figured it's about time to do a long form review on this lens. However, there are plenty of technical deep dives on this lens. So after that, I linked some of the videos I think are good down below. In this video, I want to share my thoughts, why I bought it and why I like it. Now, my first lens was actually the Sony 18-135 kit lens, but I wanted more zoom. And then when I finally bought this lens, I was stunned. Now, I should have bought this earlier, and it would have been perfect for the Toronto Honda Indy back in 2023 when I was in Canada, but I picked it up after. And the way I think that you can get accustomed to our lens is literally forcing yourself to go out and do some street photography with this. Now I know what you're thinking, how is this lens suitable for street photography? It's way too tight. However, that's why I love experimenting with new lenses. It forces you to adapt. So instead of shooting wide, I'm now thinking and going long down the street and getting a unique perspective, something that wider lenses can't do. For instance, I have the Sigma 24-70 and the Sony 18-135, and the reach just wasn't enough. And speaking of reach, this is actually an APS-C lens. If anything, this is now a 105 to 525 millimeters. Now, before I get carried away, let me go over some of the features of this lens. Now, this is an APS-C telephoto lens with a focal length of 70 millimeters all the way to 350. It has a variable aperture of f4.5 to 6.3. It weighs just 625 grams, surprisingly light. It has Sony's OSS, which is optical steady shot for built-in stabilizations, and you have a dedicated switch for that. You also have a dedicated switch for autofocus and manual focus. It has a lens lock switch for travel, so it doesn't have to extend automatically, but I've never had an issue with that. It also has a customizable button, which you can customize to your choice. It also comes with this lens hood that makes the lens look even bigger. And the price for this brand new, if you were to look on Amazon.com, it's just under $900 US. Now, this lens came back out in 2019. As far as I know, I don't see any future replacements yet. However, if you do hear any rumors for a replacement for the Sony 70-350, let me know in the comments down below. Oh no! Now, there are a couple downsides with this lens, and the first one being is that it is a variable aperture, so it's not going to have the greatest low light performance, but I'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, the other one here is that the zoom ring is at the front and the focus ring is actually at the back, which you'd think, well, how's that a downside? Well, if you had it fully extended at 350 and maybe you're pulling manual focus, the camera's now going to be very unbalanced and quite difficult to hold steady if you don't have a tripod to manually focus towards the base of the lens in the camera when there's more weight now at the front, making it harder for you. I wish this did have a constant aperture of f4 or f2.8, but could you imagine how OP this lens would be if it had that capability? It would be insane. Now, there is the Sony 70-200 f2.8, and that one is a constant aperture. However, it only goes up to 200 millimeters. This has way more reach than that. So I'm going to take a picture of my friend Stel, who's doing some B-roll right now for me, at 70mm, and then going to step back at 350, and you're going to see the distance I have to go because of this lens. Do you want like full body, or do you want half body?
You tell me. Of me. Whatever.
Right. So this is basically, that's pretty tight. I'm going to step back a bit. That's 70mm. Alright. And now I'm going to go 350. So that is 70mm and that's 350. Look at the background, how compressed it is. Which one do you prefer?
Well, I can both. It's a nice subject matter.
By the way, if you have a passion for drones, photography and everything in between and want to join a community of like-minded people, consider subscribing for future videos. Also, next week, I'm covering another lens that you voted for on my community post. So if you don't want to miss that video, hit the notification down below. Now let's move on to low light performance with the Sony 70-350. By now, you're probably skeptical about the variable aperture on this lens. And you're right to be skeptical. I was too. But I like to challenge myself. So what did I do? I went out and shot in low light with this lens. Now you have to think differently when shooting with this lens because of its aperture limitation. So you have to find pockets of light to help. A tripod could help, but I like to run a gun with street photography. So when I was out shooting in Toronto, I took this dope shot of my friend Dustin. Look how clean this is. And it was handheld. Sure, I had to stay really still and there was grain, but don't be afraid to bump up the ISO. So yes, this lens can work really well in low light. You just need to understand the exposure triangle and use your surroundings to your advantage. Now this lens is surprisingly versatile. Here's how I've used it. Now it may not have the shallowest depth of field, but if you zoom in, it works great. I've even used this at a creator meetup and got some amazing candid portraits from a distance. One of the best ways to use this is capturing people in their natural state, which is very hard by the way. You can shoot from across the road from afar and can get some great natural shots and you're not up in everyone's business. It makes a more natural photo, which I love. Now if you're tracking fast moving subjects like planes or race cars, this lens is perfect. Plus, if you're using one of Sony's newer cameras with their new AI processor, you can get some great AI tracking with this. This was the main reason I bought this lens. So for the following year, in 2024, before I left Canada, I managed to use the 70-350 at the Toronto Indy. So if you're not trackside and maybe shooting in the stands or wanting a different vantage point, this lens comes in handy because you can really punch into the cars and get a close-up shot. Serious zoom lets you capture animals without disturbing them. Another great reason to get this lens is if you want to capture wildlife, and to capture animals in their most natural state, you cannot disturb them. So you need some serious range. And after me talking about this lens so far, it has some serious zoom. Now, instead of capturing buildings as a whole, you can zoom in on intricate details. Now, you won't be encompassing the whole building most of the time, but you can get some great detail shots of a building and really focus in and enjoy the architecture. I used to do this all the time because of my OCD. I just really wanted to punch in with the lens. Now, compression makes roads and leading lines pops, and like this one I shot in Muskoka. Now, you wouldn't think this lens is fitting for landscapes as you normally want to go really wide. However, when you're at a distance, you can really compress and bring things together, making your landscape shots much more unique compared to a wide lens. I've also thrown in some random photos I've taken with this lens, such as sunsets, moons, and clouds. This is something that other lenses can't really get the detail shots of those. I don't know about you, but clouds are truly amazing to capture, especially when they are white and fluffy, and even the moon, especially a nice big full moon, and you can punch in with this lens and you can see all that detail. By the way, those moonshots are real, taken with this lens, unlike some of your Samsung phones, which with your 100 times zoom and then the AI superimposed on top. Come on now, let's get real. Ultimately, that is your decision. Hopefully in this video, I've given you enough examples to show you what this lens is capable of. And for just under $900, that's not a bad deal, especially for something that's 6 years old. Now, if you're considering some alternatives, you do have the Tamron 70-300, which is a little bit cheaper. However, you're just missing that extra reach. You do have the Sigma 100-400, which costs more than this lens, and also it's a lot heavier. You also have the Sony 100-400, which is twice the price and it's slightly heavier, unless you can pick it up used. Now, I'm really happy with the decision I made. And I know it's not the most practical lens, but even after exporting all these photos and showing them throughout this video, this really does a good job. Let me know your thoughts down below. And Sony, if you are listening, and if you are going to update this lens, please give us a constant aperture of at least f4. Now, if you enjoyed this video, drop a like. And if you want to find out if the Sony a6700 is right for you, click here. And if you want to learn more about ND filters, click here. I'll see you in the next one.